All right, we're gonna try this this again. So this is going to be a continuation from court notes from yesterday, Friday. Was yesterday Friday? Yes, yesterday was Friday. The first testimony, I already recorded that yesterday. That was David Fry. After David Fry got off the stand, apparently myself and a few other people missed somebody who came up to the stand. If you guys remember the money bag that the guys took and kept because it had credit cards in it and whatnot, and it was listed as, I think it was like the Friends of the Malheur Wildlife Refuge community or committee. Apparently somebody from this group was requested to come in by Ryan, and I think we had stepped out for break and missed this, but Ryan was seeking information from this group, and it is connected to the wildlife employee that came back to the refuge while the guys were there and collected her belongings, and to my understanding stayed and actually worked for a little while. So I wasn't in the courtroom when this person from this group came, and the person was trying to get the judge to squash Ryan's motion to request information from this group, mainly I think the names of the people that were in this group, because that would help them identify the worker that came to the refuge. If I'm understanding that correctly, because I wasn't there, I'd stepped out. In the end, the judge had this person actually go and sit down next to Ryan and said that this person needed to give Ryan the information he was requesting. So then we came back from break, and Charles Snipes testified. He is a hay farmer who came to the refuge to see what was going on. Of course, his rights are important to him, and he knew Ryan, or Ammon and Ryan were speaking on that, as well as with Lavoy and many of the others. Before being a hay farmer in another state, he worked 30 years on the fire department. He went to the protest anytime they scheduled meetings. He witnessed it to be a peaceable environment, and he felt he was learning a lot. And then Neil's attorney asked if this man remembers speaking to Neil, and he said yes. The main things he spoke to Neil about were the habeas corpus needing to be filed for the Hammonds and how he wanted them out of jail. So then Dwayne Schrock took the stand. Dwayne he did a great job. He did appear to be nervous. Some of his answers almost seemed like they didn't apply to the questions that he was being asked. So I think maybe he had thought through some of the potential questions ahead of time and was a little bit nervous, but he did a great job. He was very courageous, very bold to come up and take the stand. Dwayne is a rancher in Crane, Oregon. He said that after Agent Ben Jones took the stand for the FBI a few weeks ago, he then traveled to Dwayne's house and had a meeting with him, even though Dwayne had previously been requesting to not meet with him and turning down his invitations to meet. So this Ben Jones traveled to Dwayne Schrock's house and had about a 30-minute conversation with him, asked many questions about the occupation. Dwayne told him he did not want to talk to him. He stated he came to Dwayne's ranch the day after he took the stand, that he was trying to influence and intimidate Dwayne as to how he would testify. So Dwayne's saying that this man learned that he would be a witness and then paid him a visit. He asked him questions that he then gave him the answer to. So in other words, the agent said, "How many guns do you remember seeing at the refuge?" There were a lot, correct? And trying to lead him into agreeing that he saw things he did not see. When Dwayne actually went to the refuge, which he said he went 3 days out of every week that the occupation was going on, he saw one long gun the time that he was there. And I actually learned from somebody who was helping with doing the greeting at the gate that it was actually required that during the day, when the public was coming and going from the refuge, that they had their guns put away. They weren't to have any visual guns present. They were only to be present by a few people that were doing basically like security, making sure that they were safe, that no provocateurs came into the refuge starting trouble, trying to bring any harm to anybody. When you want to depend on yourself for protection, and you don't want to have to, you know, call for backup, it's pretty typical, especially out in Harney County, that you would be armed, but that the arms were not to be public. So the fact that Dwayne testified to only seeing one gun while he was at the refuge, because he was there during the days visiting, it makes perfect sense. And this agent wanted him to testify that the times he went there that he saw many, many, many guns at the refuge, and Dwayne was not going to do that. The other thing he wanted him to do is he wanted him to point out Ammon Bundy as the leader of the occupation. So I really believe, as I said in other videos, that the FBI would be very happy with a guilty verdict for only the Bundys, and that they would be fine to let the rest go. And that is further, I have got to stop saying you guys. That is further confirmation that that is a fact. When an FBI agent is saying, please point out that Ammon Bundy was the leader, he wanted him to physically point to him in the courtroom as the leader of the occupation, which Dwayne would not do because nobody was really leading this. Well, Ammon was the one who cared about the Hammonds and showed up to the county to stand up for them and intervene on their behalf. He was in no way the leader because they weren't doing some like organized event. He was simply wanting people to come who are willing to help get the lands put back into the people's hands. And so Ammon is a very good speaker, so he always ended up being the one in front of the cameras along with Lavoie, but there were many other people running the show, as you might say. And so Dwayne Schrock was not going to point out Ammon Bundy as the leader. They asked if he had been receiving threats or intimidation in any other ways. He said he's received many threats on his Facebook page. He had to delete that. He also said that he has cows in another state, I believe it was California, and that while they were inspected properly the first time, somebody came back a second time to inspect them again and told them that they came back because they heard that the cows he had were connected to the Bundys from Oregon. And so he basically felt like he was being harassed by these inspectors. I think they were branding inspectors because of where some of these cows had been in Oregon. He stated that the Hammonds were my neighbors and my friends. He was nominated to be on the Committee of Safety. I forgot to say yesterday how many objections were overruled and sustained, and I actually need to add it up. What I'm seeing here is that for the defense, when the defense was on the stand, there were 56 objections by the prosecution, and of those, 50 of them were sustained. And I wrote down the other side of it too, and I want to say it was like 50-50 when the defense would object to something. I think they only objected 6 times throughout the entire day, and 3 of those times she overruled, 3 times she sustained the objections. But the defense isn't objecting very much. One, they don't have anything to hide, and 2, they don't have anything to hide. That was the same thing. Okay, did you see any guns? Did you bring a gun? And Dwayne said, I always travel with a gun. This is Harney County. And then the defense asked, so is it normal to have a gun in Harney County? And he said, absolutely. And then they did ask Dwayne what was his last conversation with Ammon Bundy. And when he went to answer that, it was objected because they said it was irrelevant to his current state of mind, or I'm sorry, to his state of mind at the refuge, and that they didn't need to know what his current state of mind was. And I keep going back to when Matthew was on the stand and how they asked him if he'd put together the petition recently to have Judge Brown removed from her seat, and the fact that even though the defense objected to that, it was overruled because she said it goes to the witness's state of mind today. But then apparently when yeah, anyway, it's a lot of hypocrisy going on in this courtroom. So after Dwayne, a rancher named Tim Puckett testified. He's from Burns, Oregon. He's been there 4 years. His family, his father, also ranchers, been ranchers his whole life. He lives a quarter-mile from the refuge. He's actually the one who lives on the adjoining property to the refuge where Ammon cut the fence the one day that he did. They asked, because the prosecution brought this up at the beginning, that they cut fence, destroyed, you know, all this fencing. In the end, it was just it was a very small stretch of fencing, and the fence was completely rotted and destroyed and was serving no purpose, meaning it wasn't actually going to be able to hold any animals in because of a previous flood, and all of the posts were completely rotted out. He also stated that it was his farmhand who gave Ammon permission to cut that fence. And you'll remember the fence because it was, of course, all over the news, and the prosecution introduced that, showing that they destroyed property. Now, when the prosecution cross-examined, they did ask the rancher if he owned the fence, and he said, well, this part of the fence was already up previous to my ownership. However, if it becomes destroyed or damaged for any reason, I am able to go and do repairs, take it down, put it back up, whatever I need to do to keep my cows from going onto the refuge property. So they were trying to make the point that he didn't have the authority to tell Ammon that he could cut that down. But at the end of the day, the fence wasn't actually serving a purpose anyway. He said, well, it looked like it was up and standing. The posts were rotted and need to be redone. So this man actually called in and testified by video, which I think that's the first time. We've had 1 or 2 phone calls, but not a video call. And then I want to say there was one other person who took the stand, and now I'm not remembering and my notes aren't showing. So I'm going to do a quick recap now, since this video will be short, of what is coming. So the judge really wants this to end. She continues saying that the jury's time is important and we need to wrap this up. She seems to forget that at the beginning this was planned to go well through November. So we are very, very, very ahead of schedule right now, but she really wants the defense to rest. But the defense has a few more witnesses they're going to be calling on Monday. They want the refuge employee to take the stand who actually entered the refuge and did work. Pretty important when your charges are you kept employees from coming to work. They have a video of Lavoy they want to play. We still need to play the video of Lavoy and Ryan taking down the video cameras and then stating that the FBI needed to come pick them up. Again, in that message, the FBI, they were welcoming to come to the refuge and to pick up their cameras. So that video will be played so that Ryan can try to clear his name as far as the jury goes, showing that they in no way intended to deprive the owners of the cameras for any length of time. They wanted to actually return them after they took them down. So, okay, so Monday morning, Lavoy video, employee who entered the refuge. There was a note that they presented that it looked like Lavoy had written it, and it actually stated, take down cameras, return cameras to FBI. Now, they wouldn't let them enter this into evidence for the defense because they said that the owner, they needed to know who the owner of the notebook was. It was found in Ken Medenbach's vehicle when he drove it to Safeway. And so they wouldn't allow them to admit it because they didn't know whose notebook it was in, and the person needed to identify that Lavoy Finicum had written that, had in fact written that note. It sounds like they have identified where the note came from, and so that witness will potentially be coming on Monday to testify that that was Lavoy's handwriting, that he wrote the note, and that the memo was, we need to get these cameras taken down and then returned back to the FBI. Deborah, the team has been working on this, and they actually have a photo of the person that came to the refuge now, and a subpoena, my understanding is a subpoena has been issued. So, you guys can't hear me? Okay. Anyway, Tuesday. So Tuesday, the government will begin their rebuttal. The reason that they are getting to do a rebuttal on the Bunkerville information is because when Ammon took the stand and discussed Bunkerville, it opened it up for the government to be able to do a rebuttal on it. So whenever a witness brings forth information, the other side gets a chance to speak too. So Ammon testified in depth to Bunkerville, which gives the prosecution the opportunity to bring forth witnesses and paint their own picture of Bunkerville, because it could potentially cause the jury to only see Ammon's side of it and not see the government side. So that is, the rebuttal is scheduled to take a half a day plus. They're bringing 5 witnesses to the stand. Judge Grasty is supposed to be taking the stand for them. The defense will get to cross-examine these people. This is going to be Tuesday. So half a day of rebuttal, and then they'll go through the jury instructions and get those finalized between prosecution and defense, because they do each get to contribute to some of the things that are in the jury instructions. And the jury instructions are absolutely insane. It's an entire book helping the jurors to understand the charges brought against them and how they are to determine if the defendants are guilty or innocent of the charges. And it's a lengthy book that they have. It's pretty over the top. And then, so Tuesday, jury instructions, closing arguments potentially for the prosecution. The prosecution wants 2.5 hours for closing arguments. And then the defense could be working on their closing arguments Wednesday. They're looking at, let's see, Ammon and Ryan want about 4 hours, Shauna Cox 30 minutes, David Fry 50 minutes, Jeff Banta 60 minutes, Ken Menbach wants 60 minutes, and Neil said his closing arguments will be about 60 minutes. So you have a full day of closing arguments for the defense, and that's scheduled tentatively for Wednesday. That would mean Thursday would be issuing the jury instructions to the jurors, and then they would potentially be able to begin deliberating Thursday afternoon, and then they can do it also on Friday if they want. They typically haven't been working Fridays, but the judge is going to let them do Fridays to deliberate, and hopefully they can wrap this up. So Thursday it could be getting handed over to the jury. I do not anticipate that will happen. I think the rebuttal is going to take much longer than is being expected with the witnesses that are coming forth for the government side, and I anticipate between closing arguments and jury instructions that still have to be beefed out. I think that's going to be an entire day. So I actually anticipate maybe Friday or next Monday it will be handed over to the jurors. A few people have asked if they should come to court this week. I think if you can only come a couple days, Thursday and Friday of this week would be the days that you potentially will be able to see the closing arguments. Definitely by Thursday, see closing arguments from at least the prosecution, if not the defense, and then we'll be hopefully wrapping things up. There was something else I was gonna say. I said I can't remember. So I think that's it. I did want to say one thing that I had realized, the informants. That was what I was actually going to talk about. The judge had only received the redacted documents, and so she said there's like 130 documents that the prosecution presented with the redacted information about all of these informants. So she was going to spend the weekend reviewing those documents and trying to determine if the defense did or did not need to receive the information. We know that the Constitution states you have a right to go before your accusers, so they should definitely know who was feeding the information and what information was being fed to the FBI that allowed them to justify the ambush. We know that Mark McConnell lied about Ryan Payne, saying that Ryan Payne was going to do something to Sheriff Ward. That's information that impacted the decision to ambush these people on Highway 395. what other information was presented. Was it false information that was presented that caused the FBI to paint a picture of these people being scary armed terrorists when we know they were in fact not? So finding out who those 13 people are is important. One thing about that, and then I really will wrap this up, is that Agent Lapp, I think it was LAP, he actually lied under oath. He told us, I think it was about 3 weeks ago, he took the witness stand and he was asked many questions about the informants. He said it was his job to gather the information from the informants and to take that back to the FBI. The defense asked him, besides Mark McConnell, were there any other informants staying at the refuge? And I remember writing down, no other informants stayed at the refuge. Some of you who watched my live feed back then might remember that. He actually said that they stayed in Burns and traveled to and from the refuge gathering information. Now we know that he lied because Terry Linnell was subpoenaed and came out that she was an informant. That was just this week. Had the FBI disclosed, which is called a Brady violation, to not disclose information that's used to bring forth an arrest against somebody, had they disclosed that there were other informants at the refuge, the defense may have pushed sooner to know who they were, to make sure that they didn't call any of them as their witnesses. But because the prosecution withheld this information, they put people on the stand, still now not knowing if any of the defense witnesses have been informants, because the defense didn't ask questions asking, were you an informant? Terry Linnell actually volunteered that information on her own after she was subpoenaed. So it definitely creates a big mess that they have been lied to about these informants. Those names need to come out, and Agent Lapp needs to be held responsible for lying under oath, stating there were no informants staying overnight at the refuge. They all stayed in the town of Burns. With Terry Linnell, we know that was a lie, and as far as I'm concerned, that agent needs to be brought back on the stand and have his testimony impeached and shown that he was lying under oath and deceiving the defendants, and that was one of his primary responsibilities, was communicating with informants. So he knew Terry Linnell was staying at the refuge, and now we're figuring maybe some of the 13 were also staying at the refuge, since he wasn't being honest with us about Terry. So hopefully that will come out Monday in court, and we'll just move on from there. Or maybe there'll be an acquittal, and the government will realize that they've set these people up from beginning to end, and maybe the charges will be dropped. If not, then we'll just see it through to the end and get that not guilty verdict from the jury. So that's all. I'm down here in Portland. I'm going to go in and do a few visits and get out on a date with my hot husband who wants me off my phone. So that's all, guys. Have a good night, and I will talk to you all soon.